The multi-million-pound online fashion retailer Boohoo is facing the possibility of a US imports ban alongside many of its suppliers, following widespread allegations over the use of slave labour. US Customs and Border Protection is considering allegations from a British lawyer who claims that Boohoo is simply not doing enough to stop forced labour in the Leicester factories which make many of its clothes. Boohoo, for their part, say they've been working closely with UK enforcement bodies and that investigators examining suppliers in Leicester have found no evidence of modern-day slavery. Martin Brunt has this exclusive report from Leicester.
Boohoo sells itself and its fashions to customers who are young, trendy and glamorous. In contrast, many of its clothes are made in Leicester, on a shabby industrial estate mired in allegations of factory sweatshops and slave labour. Much of Boohoo's advertising has a backdrop of America, where its sales are worth £263 million, but that market is under threat. In its global war on slave labour, the United States already bans the imports of many products, from Zimbabwean diamonds to certain Japanese video games. Now it's being urged to target Boohoo and its suppliers. British campaigner Duncan Jepson has petitioned US Customs and Border Protection for a ban on products from Boohoo and most of Leicester's garment industry.
The evidence of Boohoo and forced labour is quite compelling. I think this will be a wake-up call for British institutions about how they're handling modern slavery and forced labour, particularly in the communities like Leicester and Leicester East. What obviously we'd all like is for Boohoo to really get to grips with the governance of their supply chain, to ensure that there is no wage theft, to ensure that people have proper contracts.
In his petition to US Customs, Mr Jepson writes, "The dire extent of labour violations in the apparel industry in Leicester has been common knowledge for a long time, and Boohoo, according to its own report, did not, and it is argued has yet to, govern and manage its supply chains effectively enough to eliminate the reasonable suspicion of forced labour."
If they do identify this in the supply chain in Leicestershire, the potential sanctions to not trade in the United States are enormous. But what it will do as well is it will create a gap for good businesses to come in and pay people properly.
Last summer, in a review, Boohoo's own investigators damned the company for ignoring deplorable conditions within its supply chain. Boohoo has 14 million online customers. Last year, its profit soared to £92 million. A month ago, it bought the online business of high street retailers Burton, Dorothy Perkins and Wallace. 40% of Boohoo's clothes are made in Leicester's factories. Saeed Khilji took me inside his own factory. He says a US ban would hurt, but insists working conditions have improved.
If American government taking any action, and if they have enough evidence to do that, then yes, there will be an effect. But I'm sure now on, there won't be a problem in Leicester. I'm 100% confident on that.
In a statement, Boohoo said, "We have been working closely with UK enforcement bodies, and it is important to note that auditors and investigators who are forensically examining suppliers in Leicester have found no evidence of modern-day slavery. We are confident in the actions that we are taking to ensure that all of our products meet and exceed the CBP criteria on preventing the product of forced labour entering the US or any of our markets." The group continues to make excellent progress as it works to implement the review's recommendations and improve our supply chain in Leicester. A customs investigation into Boohoo and the city's textile industry is likely to take several months. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Leicester.
I'm very pleased to say that we're joined now by the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. Kwarteng. Great to have you on the programme this morning. Obviously, I wonder if we can start with not necessarily anything specific to Boohoo, but some of the issues that were raised in Martin's report there. Now, as things stand, Germany and a number of other European countries are passing laws that would make companies liable for human rights breaches in the supply chains unless they had carried out their due diligence. Now, under the Modern Slavery Act in the UK, all companies have to do is publish an annual statement, and estimates vary, but perhaps as many as 2 in 5 aren't doing so. I'm just wondering, is the government minded to perhaps follow in the footsteps of some of our European colleagues and give the Modern Day Slavery Act some more kind of teeth in all of this?
I think that we were very much on the front foot on this a few years ago. Clearly, your report was very concerning. I think incidents of modern slavery are totally abhorrent, unacceptable. And I'd like to see more details. I think the Modern Slavery Act that we have is effective. Many companies have said that to me, many business owners. But we'll have to look at information and see what legislative response, if any, is required.
Well, just to reiterate from Boohoo, they have said the following: we've been working closely with UK enforcement bodies, and it is important to note that auditors and investigators who are forensically examining suppliers in Leicester have found no evidence of modern-day slavery. We will see, of course, what the response is, though, however, from the US government. But let's do something we rarely do on this programme, Minister, and at 7:05 in the morning, talk about football for a change. We're hearing from the Prime Minister that in addition to the semi-finals and the finals of the Euro this summer, he might be happy to host the entire thing. Look, as a statement of where we might be by the summer in terms of a return to normality, this is a pretty big one.
Well, I'm not sure what the actual details of this competition might be, but clearly the Prime Minister set out last week a strong roadmap. Many people I've spoken to have been very relieved at the fact that there is a timeline. I think it set clear dates by which we want to reopen things, and obviously we want to get things started, the economy up and running as quickly as possible.
But as the Business Secretary, I'm sure 2 things. One, you'd probably be happy for football to come home any day of the week. But if there's a possibility of England hosting the World Cup in 2030, that's something you're going to be full square behind.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember, I'm old enough to remember the European Cup, 96, I think it was. And that was a great occasion. We'd be very, very happy to see a significant football tournament coming back to Britain.
But can we just specifically, though, about this summer? You know, we're hearing rumours that perhaps Wembley could be properly rolled out. That given where we are with testing, given where we are with vaccination, we could have 90,000 people in Wembley. You know, perhaps one or two of us could also be there cheering on whoever's lucky enough to get to the final. I mean, are we anticipating people being able to travel here for the Euros?
It's March the 2nd now. I don't want to run ahead of ourselves. I think there's still a serious issue that we have with coronavirus. There are still people who are very ill. The vaccine rollout has been very successful. We're very happy about that. But I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and speculate about Wembley in 2 or 3 months' time.
OK, but just in terms, though, of perhaps, you know, the biggest news to emerge from the Downing Street news conference yesterday, the evidence that, frankly, all of us were waiting to hear, that reduction in mortality and hospitalisations amongst those that have been most vaccinated so far. You know, given the fact that there is no indication that as we move through the groups, vaccine efficacy will in any way drop. We're expecting it, in fact, to get better the younger people get. This is the beginning of the end, isn't it? Finally, we can actually say this is the light at the end of the tunnel.
I agree. I think the information is very encouraging, and the vaccine rollout has been very successful. I don't want to over-egg the pudding, though. I don't want to say that we're completely free of coronavirus. I think there are still dangers ahead. But you're right, the numbers are encouraging. But I don't think it would be right for me to speculate about football tournaments in 3 months' time.
Indeed. Just in terms, though, of where we are in combating COVID-19 in the United Kingdom, can you provide us any update as to whether or not we have sourced that 6th case of the Brazilian variant? And indeed, you know, have we had any indication from surge testing in South Gloucestershire just yet about any community transmission?
I think we're still monitoring the situation very closely. And you're quite right. I think there was one case of the Brazilian variant. As far as I know, there are 6 cases, but there's one where the person involved didn't fill in the forms correctly. And we're still trying to work out exactly what has happened to that potential carrier. But we're dealing with this situation. And I'd like to remind you also that we had the South African variant, and we've been dealing with that too. But the vaccine rollout has been extremely successful. And as you said earlier, it does give us a lot of cause for some hope.
Just in terms, though, of what we're going to be hearing this week, of course, tomorrow, budget day, and as is common on this programme, I'm sure you will not be drawn into commenting on specific measures which will be announced then. I do think, though, from a kind of philosophical and ideological standpoint, I mean, William Hague has said, look, you know, we have to be clear with the public, we have to level with the public. Some business, some personal taxes will have to rise. Now, away from the budget, it certainly seems like at some point over the remainder of this Parliament that tax rises in some form have to be a part of the economic response to COVID-19?
I think the main thing, certainly on my desk, and certainly the Chancellor's as well, is to support business through this very difficult time. And you will know that the support that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor in particular have given to the economy is unprecedented. We've given something like, put in something like £285 billion since the coronavirus pandemic crisis began. And I think in tomorrow's budget, the Chancellor will be very minded to support struggling businesses, struggling people as well, and so that we can get through this very difficult pandemic.
As you say, there have been huge amounts of money spent since the beginning of this pandemic in terms of business support, in terms of support for individuals, and so on. However, yesterday we learned that the government, the government, in terms of its foreign aid budget, is not just halving, is cutting by 54% the amount of money we give to Yemen. Why are we choosing this moment to do so?
I don't think that, I haven't seen the numbers, but the actual amount that we're reducing is something like 0.7 of GDP to 0.5%. And I think it was felt that given the incredible stress that we've gone through in Britain, giving 0.7% of the economy in this particular year was challenging. I think the amount has been reduced by little. And after all, the European average is 0.45, so we're still giving more of our national wealth than
I understand that, but
the EU country. Sorry, I'm trying to answer your question, but I think that I think that this is a temporary measure. I think the Chancellor has said that we want to fulfil our commitments, and we are doing so.
Yeah, it's a temporary measure at a time when tens of millions of people in Yemen are at threat of death from famine. We gave £214 million to Yemen last year. Indeed, beginning of December, we announced an additional £11 million. The Foreign Secretary telling the UN Security Council, you know, new UK aid will save lives by making sure the poorest Yemenis can feed their families. The UK cannot solve this crisis alone. Other donors must now release their funding and contribute more support to prevent this becoming an even bigger tragedy. That's the Foreign Secretary to the Security Council calling on the world to give more money. And then we announced that we're going to cut it in half.
I think he would do that anyway. And I think when you look at Yemen, and I've travelled in the Gulf a lot, there's a lot more that countries in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and other countries can do to support humanitarian crises in that region.
Perhaps we've secured those assurances before we cut our own aid budget. I mean, we're talking about lives here. And the only thing I'm going to suggest is, you know, the UN Secretary General and others are warning of a pending crisis in Yemen, and we've just counted the amount of money that we're giving them by half.
I think Britain has always been at the forefront of international aid responses. I think the people in this country are extremely generous. The government has provided all sorts of financial support and also diplomatic support to crises in the region, and will continue to do so.
As is so often the case, Minister, when we speak this time in the morning, there is a union flag over your shoulder, as there has been with many colleagues. Clearly, the union has been more in the spotlight in recent times than perhaps it has been for a long time in terms of the Conservative Party, at least since the last independence referendum. I just wonder if you agree with the Prime Minister when he says that another Scottish referendum is irrelevant, uncalled for and unnecessary.
I've always thought that the issue of Scottish independence is something for the people in Scotland. I do remember in 2014, I think it was, that they said that the referendum would settle the issue for 25 years, for a generation. And I am surprised at how often it's come back, but it's up to the Scottish people to decide when and whether they want a referendum.
Do the struggles between Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon perhaps make it rather easier for the government to resist calls for a second independence referendum, particularly if, as everyone expects, the SNP do rather well come the Scottish parliamentary elections in May?
Well, I don't know how well any of these parties are going to do. Clearly, there's been a lot of noise about what's going on in the SNP. I think that's a matter for them, their internal process, their discipline. I'm not going to be drawn in on the internal politics of the SNP. Let's just see what happens in the Holyrood election in May.
Kwasi Kwarteng, great to have you on the show this morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Our political correspondent, Tom Rayner, as always, lurking in the wings. Tom, what leapt out to you?
I thought it was the note of caution that the Business Secretary wanted to convey. You were giving him every opportunity that there was to embrace the suggestion that the European Championships could be held entirely, all games in the UK, which the Prime Minister mooted in a newspaper interview. And it was notable that Kwasi Kwarteng said he didn't want to get ahead of himself, that it's March the 2nd, well, that dangers lie ahead.
That rather begs the question, why talk about it in the terms that the Prime Minister has in his interview with Harry Cole of The Sun?
Well, it does, but we've seen this before, haven't we? In fact, Boris Johnson has been, I would say, in the last month or so, at pains to try and suppress some of the boosterism which is characteristic of his approach to politics generally. That has been kept in check clearly in the newspaper interview. When it comes to football, it has been held up as something which is actually about more than just football. It's about a symbol of what lies ahead after restrictions are lifted. But I think, Kwasi Kwarteng there saying very clearly that while the vaccine programme is being successful and while all of the data that we were receiving yesterday at the Downing Street press conference is very encouraging, there are still dangers ahead. He doesn't want to over-egg the pudding, as he put it, and he didn't want to speculate about a football tournament in 3 months' time. And I think that is notable because clearly, he's thinking about what is going to be in the budget tomorrow. He's thinking about the economic picture from his brief. We've had lots of spoonfuls of sugar in terms of announcements from the Treasury over the last few days. We don't yet know what medicine Rishi Sunak is about to administer, and I think, the tone of the Business Secretary then potentially quite revealing about the fact that in government at least, there's caution and perhaps a wariness that even though it feels like we might be getting towards the light at the end of the tunnel, that there's some way to go. Yeah, all I'm going to do is spend the rest of the morning thinking about Euro 96, for goodness sakes. Tom, thanks very much. Still to come on the programme this morning, at 25 to 8, we'll be asking whether the PM is undermining the UK's climate goals with a new coal mine planned for Cumbria. At 7:45, tackling knife crime, we'll find out how an interactive video game is helping educate young people in Scotland about the dangers of carrying a knife. And at 8:20, we'll hear how the nation's renewed love of parks is leading to concerns about the damage caused by record numbers of visitors. But let's discuss the breaking news from Nigeria in the past hour and a half or so. Gunmen have released 279 schoolgirls who were kidnapped from a boarding school in the northwest of the country. Let's speak now to our Africa correspondent, John Sparks, to try and fill in a few of the details. Morning, John. This is, of course, a good news story, first and foremost, but just explain exactly what on earth led to the kidnapping of almost 300 schoolgirls.
Yeah, good morning, Neil. Very distressing story. 279 girls from a town called Jangebe in Zamfara State, that is in the northwest of Nigeria, released overnight and then assembled in the morning in a government building for the nation's media to capture the images. I mean, it must have been a very, very distressing experience for the girls and also for their parents as well. What we know is that a group of kidnappers, almost certainly a criminal gang, took the girls on Friday night. There were about 100 of these guys dressed up in military uniforms, carrying automatic weapons. They went into the town, challenged the men to some sort of fight or a battle, we understand, didn't get one, and then headed over to the student hostel and took the girls. And we believe that around 50 of the girls managed to escape at the time by hiding under beds and hiding in the toilets, that sort of thing. Government officials said the girls were taken away. They said they knew exactly who had done it. They knew where the girls had been taken, but they didn't want to mount a rescue operation because they didn't want there to be any casualties, any potential deaths. So a very difficult situation for them, but it does beg the question, how released? Was money paid? And there certainly will be a strong suspicion that either money was paid or that vehicles were handed over, because I have to say this is becoming a growth industry in Nigeria. It's happening increasingly frequently. Criminal gangs, bandits taking advantage of the precarious security situation in the north and central areas of that country.
John, many thanks indeed. Police in Myanmar have once again clashed with protesters, firing tear gas to disperse crowds in the city of Yangon. It comes as foreign ministers from neighbouring countries were due to hold talks with the military in an effort to end the deadly violence. What hope for that? Let's ask our Southeast Asia correspondent, Siobhan Robbins. Well, just on that point, we were talking yesterday about the weekend's violence, the seeming escalation. I'm not detecting from where I am any sign that this is calming down, Siobhan.
No, and I don't think it will calm down now. What we've seen for the last month is the military being frustrated by the level of pushback that they've got from people on the streets. And we've seen that both in these protests, but also in the civil disobedience movement, which has been going on behind the scenes. And it's something we don't talk about a lot, but it is actually a key protest strategy. What they've been doing is things like bank workers haven't been going into banks, railway workers have been walking out. They're bringing down the way society can function, because essentially they say, for example, if you work in a bank, if the military leaders can't get hold of money, then the country will grind to a halt. And that's really frustrating. It's beginning to frustrate those who've taken over the country in this coup. And then so what we're seeing is this uptick in violence, because they've told people initially that they've done this for the good of the country. It's clear that thousands, tens of thousands of protesters don't agree with them. They then told protesters, to go home. They tried to restrict them with restricting the internet, restricting the phones. That hasn't worked. So they've now started using increasing violence. And I think the problem is this is going to be a pattern which continues. And how long it continues is the concern, because we know that the government or the military leaders have set themselves the target of setting a new election, but we don't actually know when that's going to be. They've said in the next year, but really, is that going to happen? Let's remember that the military held on to power in the past for around 50 years. So I think the real concern is, again, we're seeing clashes in Yangon, in Calais as well, more people being injured, and how long will this go on for?
Siobhan, many thanks indeed. Let's take you through a few of the other main stories of the day now, shall we? Prince Philip, he spent the night at St Bartholomew's Hospital in London after 13 nights at the private King Edward VII Hospital. In a statement, Buckingham Palace confirmed that the Duke is responding to treatment and is expected to remain in hospital until at least the end of the week. The Scottish Government has agreed to release legal advice from its court battle with Alex Salmond this morning, after MSPs threatened a vote of no confidence. It comes after opposition parties indicated they'd back a motion in the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, if he refused to release the documents. In a statement last night, John Swinney said this: "We have to acknowledge that the issues at stake now are not normal. The very integrity of the legal system is being questioned. Serious allegations have been made. This material allows people to confirm that these allegations are false." The man who was walking Lady Gaga's 3 dogs when he was shot by thieves said he had a very close call with death. Writing on Instagram, Ryan Fisher thanked the healthcare workers who saved his life, as well as the canine who laid next to him after the attack, who he described as an angel. The only picture painted by Winston Churchill during the Second World War is sold at auction for more than £8 million. The Moroccan landscape, which had been owned by the actor Angelina Jolie, beat the previous record for a painting by Churchill by £6 million. There are calls for the government to do more to reduce fat content in food. Health experts say it could prevent tens of thousands of deaths and reduce obesity levels by millions. Sky's Becky Cottrell reports.
While the world has been in the grip of a pandemic, the UK continues to battle an epidemic. The foods we know we shouldn't love, slowly poisoning us. Thanks in part to one of our long-time dietary foes, fat.
Obesity is a huge problem in the UK, as everyone knows. 2/3 of the population are now overweight and a huge number obese.
A new paper by the Wolfson Institute at Queen Mary University of London has a proposal to wean us off the saturates that have saturated supermarket shelves and takeaway menus. It says that reducing fats in processed foods by 20% could lead to 4.5 million fewer people becoming overweight or obese. Over 20 years, the changes could prevent 97,000 deaths from coronary heart disease and stroke, as well as 183,000 cases of type 2 diabetes. So how do you cure a national addiction to fat?
We're suggesting vegetable residues, which are healthy and contain fibre and are good for you. You immediately reduce the calorie content of that food without affecting the serving size.
Obesity gives COVID-19 a much better chance at making you seriously ill. The Prime Minister lost weight after his own battle with the virus saw him hospitalised. Now many want him to do more to help the country slim down.
Any kind of tax incentive is always going to be welcomed by businesses anyway, and so it makes sense in the field of obesity to give handouts in the same way as has been done in other areas, such as electric cars, for instance.
Reducing our fat intake under this new proposal would be gradual, but the state of the population's health needs immediate attention. Obesity, one of many vulnerabilities the virus feeds off. Becky Cottrell, Sky News.
Time now to see how the weather is looking this morning. Naz is standing by at the wall with the details. Morning, Naz. It was very chilly this morning.
Yep. It is a cold, murky morning across many areas, basically like yesterday morning. And today we are going to see some bright spells, but some places staying murky and cold all day.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So today's weather is much like it was yesterday, starting off rather grey, cloudy, cold, some patches of frost across the north and west. But then it will be brightening up with mild conditions for most places, but not everywhere. Some central and eastern parts will be rather cloudy, murky and cold all day. So at the moment, the patches of mist and fog are fairly extensive, especially across central, southern and eastern parts of England and eastern parts of Scotland too. And most of it will lift and clear into this afternoon. So we will see some sunshine developing after a murky morning and a bit of a frosty one across parts of Ireland and Northern Ireland, as well as the majority of Scotland, northwest England, most of Wales and southern counties of England, and even parts of East Anglia as well will become brighter too. But across the far east of Wales into the Midlands, perhaps some central parts of England, up towards Lincolnshire, Yorkshire, eastern parts of Scotland, it's going to be rather cloudy once again with rather murky conditions, and it will be cold across these areas. Temperatures struggling to get above around 5 or 6 degrees Celsius, up into double figures pretty much everywhere else. In the sunshine, the light winds feeling mild.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Naz, thanks very much indeed. Coming up after the break here on Breakfast. Why critics are calling Boris Johnson's backing of a Cumbria coal mine hypocritical. Welcome back. The Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has told us it is too early to speculate about hosting more football matches at the summer's European Championships. After Boris Johnson told the Sun newspaper the UK would be able to host more games if so asked by UEFA. All this as the Chancellor has set aside nearly £3 million to launch a bid for the 2030 World Cup. I asked Mr Kwarteng what he thought about the possibility of holding the tournament.
I remember, I'm old enough to remember the European Cup, 96, I think it was. And that was a great occasion. We'd be very, very happy to see a significant football tournament coming back to Britain.
But can we just specifically though about this summer? You know, we're hearing rumours that perhaps Wembley could be properly rolled out. That given where we are with testing, given where we are with vaccination, we could have 90,000 people in Wembley. You know, perhaps one or two of us could also be there cheering on whoever's lucky enough to get to the final. I mean, are we anticipating people being able to travel here for
Look, it's March the 2nd now. I don't want to run ahead of ourselves. I think there's still a serious issue that we have with coronavirus. There are still people who are very ill. The vaccine rollout has been very successful. We're very happy about that. But I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and speculate about Wembley in 2 or 3 months' time.
Joining us now on the programme, the Shadow Home Secretary, Nick Thomas-Symonds. Very good morning to you. And of course, I'm sure you will have your own memories of Euro 96, which we can perhaps talk about at another point. But in terms of what we're hearing from the government this morning, the data on vaccine efficacy that came from the Downing Street news conference yesterday is something that I'm sure you cheered as much as anyone else. It does feel like we are moving into the end game of our battle against COVID-19. Would you like to see the UK hosting more, or England hosting more of the Euros this summer?
Well, good morning, Annie. It's good to join you. With regard to Euro 96, yes, of course, I've got great memories growing up of Euro 96. I'm also a big football fan. Who wouldn't want to see a football tournament being hosted here in the United Kingdom again, of course. But the focus at the moment has to be on ensuring that we continue with the successful vaccine rollout, and we have in place measures to protect it. Now, one of the 4 tests that the Prime Minister has set for moving through the different steps is, of course, about COVID variants. And I've argued on your show previously, that we should have in place a comprehensive system of hotel testing at the border to do everything we practically can to prevent variants from coming overseas that threaten the efficacy of our vaccine. So, yes, of course, be wonderful to host a football tournament in the future, but the focus has to be on the vaccine rollout now and protecting it.
So in your call for everyone who arrives here in the United Kingdom to be subjected to hotel quarantine, how long do you think that we would need to keep that sort of scheme in place for then?
Well, firstly, there would always be exceptions. There's a list of exceptions to quarantining now, and of course, hauliers would be exempt, but it does need to be a comprehensive system. You have to take, of course, scientific and expert advice as to precisely how long that would remain in place. But clearly, you have to reach an advanced stage of the vaccine rollout, protect the vaccine rollout. Secondly, you have to allow our superb scientists to continue mapping the different genomic sequences, the different mutations, to learn as much as they possibly can about the virus. So you have to have it in place for that duration. But there is an urgency to this. We have seen the Brazilian strain reaching our shores on the 10th of February, 5 days before the government introduced even the limited measure of hotel quarantining that we do have on the 15th. So we know that government slowness at our border has been a huge problem throughout the pandemic. The government needs to act.
I wonder, whilst we have you, if we can talk about the situation as regards the Labour Party in Liverpool and the elections for the mayoralty there. Keir Starmer's big pitch, ever since he became party leader, was his competence, that Labour has put the Jeremy Corbyn days behind it. But in the Liverpool mayoral race, Labour has pulled all 3 candidates, all 3 Labour candidates, a day before ballots were supposed to go out to party members. They're all councillors, they're all Labour councillors. What is the issue with them?
I haven't been a part of that process, so I don't know the particular issue with the candidates that you've mentioned. What I do know is that there is now a process in place. A candidate will be selected, and I think what's important is that we now get behind whoever that candidate is going forward and make sure that we retain the mayoralty for Labour.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? That Liverpool is a big Labour city, and we have a situation where on the ground the Labour Party is in complete disarray without yet a mayoral candidate having been selected. I understand you're not au fait with the details, but you've got to be pretty grumpy about the way it's been handled.
Look, I always look forward in these things, not back. As I say, I haven't been a part of this process, and I'm not au fait with the details of it. I'm not a member of the National Executive Committee, nor am I, part of this process in any way. But what I see is now a determination to get a candidate in place and to get out there campaigning. We know that Liverpool has been hugely affected, like so many other parts of the country, by the Tory policies of the last 11 years. We need those strong Labour voices in Liverpool to stand up for the city. We need to get our candidate in place and get on with campaigning for them to be elected.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, good to have you on the show. Thanks for being with us. Boris Johnson has been warned by a group of foreign ambassadors that backing plans for a new coal mine in Cumbria puts him at risk of looking like a hypocrite. Let's try and explain exactly what is going on here. We're joined now by the co-founder of the environmental think tank, E3G, and the former government advisor, of course, Tom Burke. Tom, great to have you on the show this morning. Can you just explain exactly what is going on here? We understand the UK's leadership role in COP, fast approaching, of course, but we're opening a coal mine. What on earth is happening here?
Well, I wish I knew. Clearly, you have a situation in which the Prime Minister is asking people, as he is at the summit that Britain is hosting today of the Powering Past Coal Alliance, they're asking people to do more to drive coal out of our economy at the same time as he's opening a coal mine himself. Now, I should think to most of his peers, that's very baffling. And it certainly doesn't encourage them to treat him as a serious partner when it comes to the big meeting in Glasgow at the end of the year.
None of which, of course, Tom, is to say that the UK hasn't made incredible strides over the past few years in cutting reliance on carbon within the national grid.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's what makes this mistake in a way so bad, because we have really managed both to drive down our own emissions while making our economy grow at the same time. So we've proved that that can be done. And also in things like the Climate Change Act and indeed like the Powering Past Coal Alliance, given the world a real lead. And yet to sort of mess it up for some sort of clearly lack of grip inside the government is a really bad error. And it's an error with consequences, because all of the leaders that he has to get to agree at the COP in Glasgow, they've all got difficult problems at home with their own net transition. And this kind of mistake encourages their internal opposition of his peers. And that of course, is not welcome.
I suppose, though, those who argue explicitly in favour of the coke mine in Cumbria point out that it's producing special coking material for use within the steel industry, boost the UK end of that particular industry, reduces our reliance on importing the same material from overseas, reduces our carbon footprint in that regard.
There's a case that you might be able to make for it, but in a sense, the substantive case about that this might have a marginal benefit for carbon emissions is outweighed by the real political damage that's done. You could very easily have got the timing of this right so it didn't get in the way. There's no a sense in which a decision literally as small as this one should be having consequences for a conference as big as the one we're going to have in Glasgow at the end of the year. So again, it just reinforces that idea that there's a bit of a lack of grip in the Prime Minister's office, and that's something that makes other leaders feel that he may not be a reliable partner.
Just finally, Tom, just briefly, in terms, though, of our nation's energy security, we understand in the past the reliance that there's been on, natural gas and so on coming from the east. We know how temperamental those pipelines can sometimes be. Don't we, to an extent, need to retain some or some capacity to use carbon within the national grid to guard against those prospects?
I don't think we need to retain burning carbon for our power system. I think there may be an argument for some aspects of industry, about what they call the hard-to-abate industries, where we might need to find some way of using carbon, burning carbon in a carbon neutral way, in a net zero way. But I don't think there's any need at all for it in our power system. And again, if you really want to ensure your energy security, then driving bills down by improving the energy efficiency of our notoriously poorly insulated homes is the best way possible. And again, the government's just made a real mess of a very good idea of putting a lot of money into insulating people's homes, and it just messed it up in the way it went about it. So it's not a problem of our energy security as much as our national competence.
Indeed. Tom Burke, great to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Neil.
Still to come on Breakfast this morning, tackling knife crime. We'll be finding out how an interactive video game is helping educate young people in Scotland about the dangers of carrying knives. Now, a new video game aimed at reducing knife crime is to be launched in Scotland. The game aims to teach young people to speak up and get help if a friend or someone they know is carrying a knife. Well, let's speak now to Oriel Taylor from the group No Knives, Better Lives to give us a bit more information on this. Oriel, great to have you on the show this morning. Before we talk about the game, just tell us a little bit about how much of an issue knife crime amongst young people remains in Scotland. Over the past few years, of course, we've heard a huge amount about the very significant work that the Violence Reduction Unit had in reducing knife crime in Glasgow, for example.
Yeah, so the numbers in Scotland have decreased a lot, and particularly over the last 10 years, they have come down. But, you know, we work in a prevention context. So we, alongside the Violence Reduction Unit and other national partners, it's prevention we work with, and prevention doesn't just happen in a crisis context. So we continue to work with young people all the time to educate them and to support them and give them the information they need around knife crime. It is coming down in Scotland. It is not common for young people to be carrying knives in Scotland, but one instant of carrying and using a knife can be one too many, and it's quite a devastating effect in the whole community. So it's still work that needs to be done, and it is ongoing.
Yeah, well, tell us then a little bit about the game. Nae Danger, love the title. It's kind of one of those choose-your-own-adventure games, which back in my day we used to do with a book. You're now using computers. It's amazing the way technology has got advanced over the years.
Yeah, it's a really exciting new game. We were actually approached by the company Pocket Size Hands, who developed the game, and they were using us to consult on another bit of work they were doing. And then we just kind of thought, well, this would be a really exciting new thing to bring to Scotland and to the young people across Scotland. We've done plays in the past. We do lots of other projects like peer education, and we've done forum theatre in schools, and we thought this might be something that's different. It's engaging young people where they like to hang out, where, you know, they're online, they're doing gaming, so why not look at how we can bring our messaging into a game? I guess it was hard for us to vision initially how that could look, but Pocket Size Hands were brilliant at helping us bring that together so we can get all the serious messaging and open up the dialogue with young people, but also make it really fun and engaging, which was really important. And we also worked with the group Youth Just Us, which was a group of care and justice experienced young people, and they helped us go through the script, taking ideas, opinions, experiences, and helping that build all that into the game, which was fantastic. And actually 4 of them ended up being the voices for the characters in the game, which we're really happy with as well. So that really helped us shape the game to make sure it was authentic for young people, and it was still really fun and engaging to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the word there that I was about to deploy. Authenticity, when you're speaking to young people, is absolutely key, isn't it? I mean, if you start talking about being with it or hip, you know, they tend to turn their noses up and exit the room. You want to speak to them in their own language.
Yeah, so No Knives Better Lives, we take a youth work approach. So we really, we're part of YouthLink Scotland, which is the national youth agency for youth workers. And we take that youth work approach, which is including young people and including their voices in everything that we do. So we try and make sure that we, instead of just coming in and talking at them, that we engage with young people and we make it as engaging as possible. So the game is there to be played. It's interactive. You play it in groups. You play it with a facilitator. So that would be a teacher or a youth worker. And we've got this kind of a user manual that goes along with it. So there's points in the game you can pause, you can have discussion, you can open up that dialogue with young people. And that's really the important part with this game as well. It's opening up that conversations with young people, building on trusted relationships, allowing them to know that they can explore and discuss that with you, so they can look at all the aspects of the game and not, as well as playing it through and it being fun and engaging. So it's got those elements to it as well. So you can have that discussion with that youth worker or that teacher as well, which I think is really important to go alongside that.
Really is, really is. Oriel Taylor, National Coordinator for No Knives Better Lives. Great to have you on the show this morning. Best of luck with the game.
Thank you.
Time for the weather. Here's Naz.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Today is a repeat performance of yesterday's weather. So starting off rather murky this morning, most of the mist and fog lifting and clearing into this afternoon, revealing sunny spells for most places, but some areas will stay cloudy and cold and murky all day. So at the moment, mist, fog, low cloud is fairly extensive out there this morning. And there are some clear spells across parts of the north and west where there's a bit of a frost in places too. It's a cold morning, of course, as well. Into this afternoon, most of that burns away, so we are going to see some good spells of sunshine developing, but as you can see across some parts of the Midlands towards Lincolnshire, Yorkshire, eastern parts of Scotland and perhaps edging into western parts of East Anglia, it will be cloudy, cold and murky today.